Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to create a NuGet package in Azure Devops and publish it to an internal feed using artifacts and also Azure Devops pipelines. So first off, I'm going to show you how to set up your library. So you're going to set it up as a repo inside Azure Devops. So I'm going to create a new repo here and I'm just going to call it my NuGet package. Once I've done that, I can choose whether I want to add a git ignore. I'm going to add one for Visual Studio because I'll be working in Visual Studio, and I'm going to go ahead and create that repository. Now that repository is created, I can clone that inside my Visual Studio. So inside that repository location, I can specify my Git repository URL, and I can go ahead and clone that. Once it's finished cloning, I'll open up the folder there, and if I click on that, it should show me my git ignore and readme. I don't have a project yet, so I'm going to want to go ahead and add one. So I'll go new project. And I'm wanting to select a library project with C# language. So you can filter down these different project types. I'm going to filter it down to library. I've got this class library here for C#, and I'm going to select that and go next. I'll give it a name. So I'm going to call mine Some Numbers. And it could contain a variety of functions for summing numbers in different ways, but I'm just going to implement one. And then I'm just going to specify where I want it to be stored, which is in my NuGet package repo. I'm going to use .NET 6. And I'm going to go ahead and create my project. It's going to open up that solution. And I've got this class 1 file where I can define any code that I want to be available from my library. I'm going to change this name to calculator. And I'm going to define a function. So I'm going to create a function SumEvens that takes in an integer array, and it will sum all the even numbers in the integer array. I'm also going to want a variable to store the sum, and I'm going to want to return that at the end of the function. Inside here, I'm going to want to check if it's even. So if I use this remainder and use the remainder with 2 as an operand, then I'll get whether it's even. And if I check if it's equal to 0, that's when it's even. 1 would be an odd number. So when it's even, I'll increment that sum. And I'm just going to rename this file as well, just to reflect the name of the class. Now that I've got my library, I'm going to want to go ahead and add a test library, test project. So the reason I want to do this is in my Azure DevOps pipeline, I want to make sure that I'm not releasing broken code. So I'm going to want to be able to add tests to and run those tests to make sure that anyone who makes any changes doesn't break any of the existing functionality inside my library. I'm just going to call that somenumbers.tests. And once again, that's .NET 6. I'm going to give my test a different name. I'm going to want to give it a name that represents that it's summing the even numbers. Inside my test, I'm going to want to make a call to my library function, which is calculator.sumEvens, and I'm going to want to pass it an int array. So first off, I'll define that int array. It's just going to be an int array with 1, 2, 4, 3, and then 2. So it should sum up to 8 because it should sum 2, 4, and 2 to make 8, as those are the even numbers in the array. So if I get the sum by using my calculator method and pass in my nums, so you can see that calculator's got a red line, and that's because I have to add that project reference to some numbers from the test so that I can access that calculator class. So now I've got a sum. I can just check that it equals the value I'm expecting. I'm expecting it to equal 8, so I'm going to replace that 3 with 8. In proper tests, you would probably add more test cases, so I might test including negatives and that sort of thing, and make sure that it still calculates the correct value. So now that I've defined those, I can rename that class. Just make sure it aligns with rename that file to make sure it aligns with the class name. And then I can go ahead and run the tests. So you'll see that there's an option when you right click to run the tests, and they'll open up the Test Explorer and run the test for you. So go ahead and do any building it requires and run the tests. Oh, no, my test has failed. Okay, so now I need to go look at why my test is failing. It says expected 8, actual 1. I could debug, but I'm just going to go have a look at my code first and see if I've done anything obviously wrong. So if I go back to my calculator, I can see where I'm checking if a number's even. I'm actually just checking the sum. I should be checking I. So because the sum isn't even, because it was 1, because that was the first number in the array, it was returning false after adding 1 to the array, 1 to the sum. But yeah, now that I've fixed it, it should check each individual number rather than the sum. Cool, and my tests are passing, so I'm ready to go ahead and push my changes. When I push my changes, I can then go ahead and set up the build pipeline. Just give a little descriptive message. And I actually need to do one more thing. I want to set up my properties for my NuGet package so that it credits the right person and gives the copyright information and stuff like that. So here in Authors and Company, I'm going to just alter that slightly. So I'll alter the company to miscoding to represent me, and also the author to represent my actual name. So if I go down, I can also go ahead and add a description and copyright message. So just a package basically for summing evens. And I'm going to give that the date and my company name. Cool, so now that that's all done, there are additional options you can add, like read me an icon and all that sort of thing. I'm not going to bother including that today. I'm just going to show you how to actually publish it using a build pipeline. So now that's done, I can head back over to Git changes, and I can alter that message to include that I've updated my NuGet package properties. Once that's done, I'll just commit all of those files, and I'm going to push them to the remote. Ideally, you would also update your README and stuff like that, but I haven't bothered for the purpose of this example. If I go ahead and refresh that, you're going to be able to see that I've got my projects and solutions inside that Some Numbers folder. So now I'm going to go set up my NuGet package feed. So to do that, first you'll go to Artifacts. You set up the feed first so that there's a feed available for you to publish to. So I'm going to click that button, Create Feed, and I'm going to give it a name. You can specify the visibility of your feed, so whether it's just members of your Azure Active Directory, your specific organization, or specific people. And you can specify the scope of the NuGet package. Cool, now that my feed's been created, I can go and create my Azure Devops pipeline. So I'm going to select Azure repos Git because that's where I've stored it. I'm just going to start with that basic starter pipeline. I'm going to clear a majority of these out, and I'm going to use this little helper to add tasks. The first thing I'm wanting to do is create a job which will build and test. So the reason I want this as a separate job is because I could set up a branch policy at a later date that if anyone's creating a pull request to main, it'll run this particular job and only allow them to merge if it succeeds. For now, this will be run every time, and there will be no pull requests just because I'm just doing the example of how to set up the pipeline. But I'll do a video at a later date on how to set up these different branch policies. So basically I've selected which feed that I want to restore from. So first I'm going to want to do a restore. Then I'm going to want to go ahead and do a build. I'll give each of these steps a display name, just to make it obvious what they're doing. So now that I've done my restore, I'm going to go ahead and add a build. You need to specify the path to the projects. I'm going to include all my projects. It's just going to be the test project and the normal project. I'm once again going to specify a display name. And they'll just be .NET build. And the final part of this is I am actually going to specify that I want to run my tests. So I'm going to do a .NET core test command, and I'm going to specify the tests project. So I'm wanting to specify that the name matches with the somenumbers.tests.cs project. I'm just going to actually accept anything that ends in .test because I might add more at a later stage. So yeah, that's why I'll just add the .test.cs project. So once I've done with that, I can add that task, and I can give that a display name as well. That will just be .NET Test. So those will be the tasks that are run basically every time. I want that to run when my pull request is created or when code changes and triggers my pull request branch policies to be reevaluated. But I also want this one job here, which is going to create my NuGet package, to only run when it's either manually triggered or when I merge to main. So that's why I'm creating a separate job here. I'm not going to specify that condition at this stage because I don't have pull requests, but that's why I've got a separate job. So basically this job is just going to go ahead and create the NuGet package and push it to my feed and publish it. So I'm going to say that it depends on build and test because those are doing our building and testing, and we want it to only really run if it succeeds. So now let's go ahead and add some steps. So once again, I'm using this .NET Core task, and I'm going to choose the pack command, and I'm going to specify the project that I want to pack. I'm wanting to pack that sum numbers project, so I'm going to want to specify that inside that path. And I'm going to specify that I want some automatic package versioning. I'm going to want to specify that I want it to be based on the build number. So I'm going to say use the build number, and I'm going to go ahead and add that. So once I've added that, it's got all these different inputs to the command, and I'm going to want to give this one a display name as well. I'll just call this one .NET Pack. I'm also going to want to do a NuGet push, and I'm going to specify that I want to push to this target feed. I can give this one a custom display name as well. You can opt to push to external feeds if you want to, but this is more if you're wanting to share some code with teams internally, or say you've got some microservices, you might have some shared code that is useful across multiple, like validation. Finally, I'm going to publish my build artifacts. So now that that is added, I can go ahead and add a display name for this. And I'll give that the display name Publish Artifacts. I'm going to also specify a target path. And that's just going to be where I'm publishing to. This is just useful for sort of separating things out a bit. So now that I've got that done, I can go ahead and save and run. It'll commit a cloud build.yaml file directly to the main branch, and then you can go ahead and make changes to that in the future, and it will also trigger it to rerun. So we've got our build and test, and that seems to be running well. It's passed all the tests and built and restored successfully. So now it goes ahead and goes to create that NuGet package, and it seems to be failing for some reason. Okay, so the reason that it's failing is that I haven't actually specified the build number. So that actually comes from the name property. So if I go edit this build pipeline here and specify a name inside this cloud Azure pipelines.yaml file, I can specify the what version I want it to be. And this $rev colon R basically means that it'll be the run number. So like the second time I run it, it'll be 1.0.2. Third time I run it, it'll be 1.0.3, and so on and so forth. So now that I've fixed that up, I can go ahead and run that new pipeline, and it should go ahead and create my NuGet package. So once those tests are completed, it goes ahead and checks out the code, does a pack, succeeds at that, so that's looking pretty good. It pushes and publishes the artifact. And if I go along to my artifacts, I should be able to find my newly created NuGet package in there. So I'm just going to filter by keywords and search for some numbers. Cool, there it is, and it's version 1.0.2 because that was my second time running that build. If you want to use this NuGet package in Visual Studio, you can specify directly a package source and add that manually to your package sources. Or the easiest way is actually to include a NuGet.config file in your project in the same folder as your CS project or solution file, and it will automatically be picked up by the Azure pipelines of anything that's building those projects. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have, please like and subscribe for more content.